The morning I turned 68, my estranged daughter mailed me a box of the imported chocolates I'd loved my whole life. I thought it meant she was finally ready to forgive me. But those chocolates were laced with something meant to stop my heart. She only made one mistake. I gave that gift to her own mother-in-law, the kindest woman I know. That single decision saved my life, landed an innocent woman in the ICU, and started a fight I never wanted but swore I would finish. Before I tell you the rest, do me a favor and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe the truth is worth fighting for, no matter who's on the other side of it, hit that like button and subscribe. It was a Thursday, and Thursdays in my house are quiet. Always have been since my wife passed. I was sitting in the kitchen of the same little ranch house in Springfield I've owned for 40 years, drinking my coffee black the way the cardiologist hates, watching a robin hop around the bird feeder out back. 68. The number didn't bother me. What bothered me was how few people knew it was even my birthday. Then I saw the package sitting on the porch through the screen door. Brown box, no return label, just my name and address in handwriting I'd have recognized in a coma. Tight, slanted, every letter leaning forward like it was in a hurry. My daughter's handwriting. Whitney's. I sat there looking at it for a good while before I brought it in. 2 years. 2 years since she'd hung up on me and told me I'd ruin her wedding by saying one honest thing about the man she married. 2 years of Christmases where I mailed a card and got nothing back, of voicemails that went straight to a full inbox. It wasn't a clean break. It was more like watching a tide go out so slow you don't notice the water's gone until you're standing on dry sand, wondering where the ocean went. I cut the tape with my pocket knife. Inside, wrapped in gold tissue paper, was a box of those Belgian chocolates with the little gold foil on each one, Marchetti's. The exact brand my wife used to buy me every February. There was a card tucked under the ribbon. 3 words, no more. Thinking of you. No dad. No love. No name. Just those 3 words floating there like they'd been written by somebody who wanted to say as little as possible while still saying something. I held that box in my hands and I felt my eyes sting. I'll be honest. Because here's the thing my daughter knew and the thing that should have stopped me cold right then if I hadn't been so busy hoping. I can't eat chocolate. Not anymore. The doctor took it off the table 4 years ago, sat me down after my second stent went in and listed off everything that could kill me. And chocolate, caffeine, the rich stuff. It was all on the list. Whitney was in that waiting room. She drove me to that appointment. She heard him say it. So a box of chocolates from her wasn't a peace offering. It sat in my hands feeling heavier than it had any right to. It felt like a message I couldn't read yet, like she was reminding me of everything I'd lost, or worse, like she didn't remember me at all anymore. Didn't remember the man who couldn't have a single one of those gold-wrapped pieces without putting himself in an early grave. The clock over the stove ticked. I've got an old wind-up clock my father left me, and in a quiet house it sounds like somebody tapping their finger on a table, waiting. Tap, tap, tap. What now? What now? Letting good chocolate go to waste felt like a sin my mother would have smacked me for. And then I thought of Dorothy. Dorothy Pruitt is Whitney's mother-in-law, the mother of the man my daughter married, and somehow over these 2 years of silence she'd become one of the few real friends I've got left. She's a widow too. We sit on her porch sometimes and drink lemonade and don't talk about our kids because there's nothing good to say. Dorothy has a sweet tooth that won't quit. She'd light up like a Christmas tree over a box of Marchetti's. That felt right, better than letting them sit on my counter turning into a monument to everything that had gone wrong. So that afternoon I put the box on the passenger seat of my truck, the way I always set things I don't want sliding around, and I drove the 20 minutes over to Dorothy's place on Linden Street. She opened the door before I'd even hit the top step, wiping her hands on a dish towel, that big warm smile already going. Well, if it isn't the birthday boy, she said. Somebody had told her. Probably the ladies from church. What have you got there? Brought you something, I said, and held out the box. From Whitney. She sent them. I can't eat the things, you know that. Figured you'd put them to better use. Dorothy's whole face softened. She took the box and turned it over, reading the gold label. Oh, these are the expensive ones, the good ones. She looked up at me. That was sweet of her. Maybe she's coming around, hon? Maybe, I said. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to. She insisted I come in for coffee. Decaf for me, she knows the rules. And we sat at her kitchen table for an hour and talked about her tomatoes and my gutters, and the new pasture neither of us could warm up to. When I left, she walked me to the door with the box tucked under her arm like a treasure. I'm gonna have a couple of these tonight with my tea, she said. Don't you tell my doctor. Your secret's safe, I said, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Like I'd set down something I didn't know I was carrying. That evening, the phone rang while I was rinsing my dinner plate. Whitney's name on the screen. My stomach did a slow flip. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up, because I didn't want her to think I'd been sitting by the phone, even though God help me I had been for 2 years. Hi, Dad. Her voice was light, casual, like we talked every Sunday. Like the last 2 years hadn't happened. Happy birthday. Thank you, sweetheart. I leaned against the counter, my heart doing something hopeful and stupid in my chest. I got your package. Those were always my favorite. A little pause. Then, did you have some? You should have one tonight. Treat yourself. It's her birthday. There was something underneath her voice, an eagerness that didn't sit right. Whitney's never pushed me to do anything in her life, and there she was, pressing. You know I can't, honey, I said slowly. Doctor's orders, same as always. I gave them to Dorothy. She'll enjoy them more than I could. The line went silent, and it wasn't a dropped call. I could still hear the faint hum of an open connection, the sound of a house behind her. It was a silence with weight to it, the kind that fills up a room. It stretched out, 3 seconds, 4, 5, and I stood there with the phone against my ear listening to my own daughter not breathe. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. The warmth was gone, drained right out of it. You gave them to Dorothy. It wasn't a question. It came out flat and cold, like a door closing in another room. That's right, I said. Why? I heard her pull in a sharp breath, then a slow exhale, controlled, deliberate, the kind of breath you take when you're trying not to lose it. And then the line went dead. No goodbye. Nothing. I stood in my kitchen holding a dead phone, and a cold feeling I couldn't name started creeping up the back of my neck. That silence, that tone. That wasn't a daughter disappointed her gift went to somebody else. That was something else. Something I didn't have a word for yet, and didn't want one. The next morning, the whole thing came apart. The phone went off a little after 8. It was Whitney's husband, Cole. We hadn't said 2 words to each other in 2 years, and now his name was lighting up my screen at 8 in the morning. I knew before I answered. Some part of me already knew. It's Mom, he said, and his voice was shaking. She collapsed. I'm at Mercy General. They can't figure out what's wrong with her. Her heart she just went down. The mug slipped right out of my hand and shattered on the kitchen tile. I didn't even feel it. The whole room had gone narrow and white, and then one single thought burned its way up through everything else, clear and terrible. Cole, I said. The chocolates. Did she eat the chocolates? He went quiet. What? She said you brought over some candy. She had a few last night with her tea. She texted Whitney about it. Why? What does that have to do with anything? I couldn't answer him. I couldn't breathe, because it had clicked into place all at once with a clarity that made me sick. The gift I couldn't eat. Whitney pushing me to have one anyway. That dead, awful silence when she found out I'd passed them along. It wasn't a careless gift. It wasn't a mistake. It was a weapon. And I had wrapped my own hands around it and handed it to one of the kindest people I've ever known. I told Cole I'd be right there, and I hung up before he could ask me anything else. And then, instead of getting my keys, I walked to my kitchen trash can. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that'd been crawling up my neck since the phone call the night before. I lifted the lid, and my heart stopped. Sitting right on top, next to a coffee filter, was a little glass vial. Small, clear, the kind you'd keep liquid medicine in. No label. And clinging to the inside, a faint white residue. I had never seen that vial before in my life. I had not put it there. I'd taken the trash out myself 2 days ago and put it in a fresh bag. My hands started to shake. And then a memory surfaced, cold and exact. Before I'd driven the chocolates over to Dorothy's, I'd done something I do without even thinking, an old habit. I'd opened the box just to look at them, to see if they were the same ones my wife used to buy, and one of them, the corner of one, had a little smear on it, like something had been pressed into it and the foil resealed crooked. I hadn't thought a thing of it at the time. I just closed the box back up and taken them over. I didn't go to the hospital first. God forgive me, I should have. But Dorothy was already in the best hands she could be in, and there was nothing my standing in a waiting room would do for her. What I could do was find out what was in that vial before whoever left it came back for it, because somebody had been in my house. That vial didn't walk in on its own. I had a friend named Roy from my years at the plant. Roy spent 30 years as a chemist for an agricultural company before he retired, and he kept a little setup in his garage, ran soil tests for farmers, that kind of thing. The kind of man who could keep his mouth shut. I bagged that vial using a sandwich bag and a pair of kitchen tongs, never touched it with my fingers, and I drove it straight to Roy's. He took one look at me on his doorstep and didn't ask a single question. Just brought me into the garage and put on his glasses. What am I looking at? I need to know what's in that, I said. And I needed to stay between us until I say otherwise. Roy worked for the better part of 2 hours while I sat in an overturned bucket and stared at a crack in his concrete floor. When he finally turned around, his face had gone gray. "Where'd you get this?" he said quietly. "Just tell me." He set the vial down very carefully, like it might go off. "It's a concentrated solution, mostly a glycoside, the kind you'd pull out of oleander, foxglove, that family of plants. Cardiac glycoside." He took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. In a person with a healthy heart, a small dose might just make them sick. But in somebody with a bad ticker, somebody already on heart medication? He looked at me dead on. "This stops the heart, and it's hard to catch on a standard tox screen unless somebody knows to look for it. Whoever made this knew what they were doing. This isn't an accident, friend. This was put together by somebody who did their homework." I sat on that bucket and felt the whole world tilt, because I take 3 heart medications, and Dorothy has a pacemaker. And the one person on this earth who knew both of those facts, who knew exactly what would happen if I ate one of those chocolates, was the daughter I raised. The daughter who pushed me to have one over the phone. The gift wasn't thoughtless. It was aimed. It was aimed at me, and Dorothy had walked right into the line of fire because I handed her the gun and called it a present. "Roy," I said when I could finally talk, "I need you to write it all down. Every test, every number. Date it. Sign it." "Already am," he said. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the vial sitting there in its little bag. "I'm going to do the right thing," I said, "even if it's the hardest thing I've ever done." Then I drove home to get the vial somewhere safe, and when I lifted that trash can lid a second time, my blood ran cold. It was gone. The vial was gone, but I had it in my pocket in Roy's sandwich bag, so for one wild second, I thought I'd lost my mind. Then I understood. There had been 2. Whoever was working this had left a second vial or come back for the first, and either way it meant they'd been inside my house again. That very morning while I was at Roy's. The bag in the can was turned the wrong way. The coffee filter that had been on the left was on the right. Somebody had gone through my garbage looking for what I'd already taken. I checked every door and window in that house. Back door bolted, windows latched. But at the front door, when I ran my thumb along the strike plate, I found it, a fresh bright scratch in the brass right at the lip where the bolt slides home. The kind of mark a key makes when it's a copy that doesn't quite fit, the kind you've got to jiggle to make work. And I knew exactly who had a key. After my wife's funeral, Whitney stayed with me for a week to help me sort through her mother's clothes, and I'd given her a key so she could come and go. She never gave it back. In all that grief, I never thought to ask. I'd handed my own daughter a key to my house, and she'd used it to walk in while I was gone and clean up after herself. I sat down at the desk in the spare room, the room where I used to help Whitney with her math homework 40 years ago, and I pulled out a yellow legal pad. My hands had finally stopped shaking. The fear had burned off and left something harder behind. I drew a line down the middle of the page. On one side, I wrote what I knew. On the other side, what I could prove. What I knew filled the page. Whitney sent the chocolates. She knew I couldn't eat them. She knew about my heart, about Dorothy's pacemaker. She pushed me to eat one. She went silent and cold when she learned I'd given them away. A poisoned vial appeared in my home and then vanished. Someone had been in my house with a key. What I could prove was a much shorter list. Roy's report, the bagged vial. That was about it. It wasn't enough. A defense lawyer would tear my memory of a phone call to ribbons. I needed her own words. I remembered the little voice recorder I'd used years ago to dictate notes for the neighborhood association. I dug it out of a drawer and the battery had just enough charge. I slipped it into the breast pocket of my jacket, and the small weight of it against my chest felt like the only solid thing in the world. Driving to Whitney's was like driving into another country. She and Cole lived in one of those new developments where every house is the same beige, with the same little maple tree staked in the same square of sod. Picture perfect. A pretty lie. Her car was in the driveway. I walked up the path and knocked, and when she opened the door I watched genuine shock cross her face before she covered it with something smooth. "Dad, this is a surprise." She didn't open the door any wider. "Is it?" I said, and I stepped past her into the house. It smelled like lemon cleaner and nothing else. Everything in its place, everything at right angles. There were 3 boxes of those same Marchetti chocolates sitting on her kitchen counter, none of them opened. She saw me see them. "I heard about Dorothy," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Cole called me this morning. Terrible thing. They figure out what happened?" She wouldn't look at me. "They think it might be a reaction to a new medication. Her heart." "Huh," I said. "Funny. Dorothy told me she had a couple of those chocolates last night, with her tea." I watched her face. "The ones you sent." Whitney went very still. "Lots of people eat chocolate, Dad." "Sure they do," I said. I let the silence sit. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere a clock ticked. "Funny thing is, I never told you Dorothy had them. On the phone last night, I just said I gave them away." I tilted my head. "How'd you know it was Dorothy that ate them?" She blinked. Just once, but slow, the way a person blinks when their brain is scrambling to catch up to a mistake, their mouth already made. "Cole must have told me," she said. "Cole found out this morning, same as me," I said. "From the doctors." The mask came down for half a second, just half a second, but I saw it. I saw the cold thing underneath, the calculation, the animal stillness of something that's just heard a twig snap. Then the smile came back, brittle now. "I don't like what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," I said. I took a step closer. I could feel the recorder against my chest, a silent witness. "I'm going to ask you one question, Whitney, and the answer's going to be whatever you make of the quiet after it." I held her eyes. "Did you put something in those chocolates?" The silence that followed had a life of its own. It pressed against the walls of that spotless kitchen. She stared at me, jaw tight, and she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. "Goodbye, Whitney," I said, and I turned for the door. "Dad." Her voice came out low, sharp. "You keep this up. You keep accusing me. You're going to lose me for good. You understand that? You'll lose your only child." I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. "I'm not accusing you," I said. "I'm collecting." I walked out into the cold morning sun, got in my truck, and pressed stop on the recorder. My hands were steady. My whole life had just come down around me, and my hands were steady. I drove to the far corner of a grocery store lot, sat there for a minute, and then I called the police and asked to speak to a detective. I told them my name, and I told them I believed my daughter had tried to murder me. The detective they assigned was a woman named Sergeant Okafor, sharp-eyed, patient, the kind who listens more than she talks. I laid it all out for her. The chocolates, the vial, Roy's report, the recording, the scratched strike plate. She didn't tell me I was crazy. She didn't tell me I was right either. She just started pulling threads. And the threads led somewhere I never could have braced myself for. It turned out my daughter and her husband were drowning. Cole's business, some kind of real estate flipping outfit, had gone belly up the year before and taken $250,000 and borrowed money down with it. They'd remortgaged the house. They were behind on everything. And about 8 months back, Whitney had taken out a life insurance policy on me. $300,000. She'd done it as my power of attorney, a thing I'd signed years ago and forgotten about. Back when we were close. Back when I trusted her with everything. She'd named herself the beneficiary. I had no idea it existed. The detective got a warrant. In the garage of that beige house behind the lawn fertilizer, they found a row of mason jars. Soaking in them were the cut stems of oleander, that pretty poisonous shrub half of Florida plants without thinking. On the family computer, they found the search history. How much oleander is lethal? Cardiac glycoside symptoms. Does oleander show on autopsy? Untraceable poisons, page after page, going back months. And they found a notebook. I didn't see it until the trial. A small black notebook in Whitney's handwriting. that tight forward-leaning scrawl I'd have known anywhere, the same hand that wrote "thinking of you" on a card. In it she'd kept notes like a recipe, doses, timing, a page with my initials and the words "primary weak heart, no witnesses." A page that made the whole courtroom go silent, where she'd written out, plain as a grocery list, what came after. The insurance payout, the debts cleared, and a line near the bottom, and that same neat hand, that I will hear in my head until the day I die. Once Dad's done, deal with Cole if he gets cold feet. She hadn't just planned to kill me. She'd planned to kill her own husband, too, if he wavered. My daughter wasn't a frightened, cornered woman who'd made a terrible mistake. She was an architect. She'd drawn up the blueprint, and she'd been building it for months. The trial took 9 days. Cole, it turned out, had known. Maybe not the chocolate specifically, but he knew the shape of what she was doing, and the night Dorothy collapsed, something in him broke, because he was the one who told the detective where the jars were. His own mother in the ICU did what 20 years of marriage couldn't. He took a plea and testified. He sat in that witness box and could not look at Whitney, not once. Dorothy lived. I want you to know that. She spent 11 days in the hospital, and there were 2 nights they didn't think she'd make it. But that pacemaker and a fast paramedic and the grace of God carried her through. She testified, too, from a wheelchair, her voice thin but steady, and when the defense lawyer tried to suggest she'd just had a bad reaction to her own medication, she looked at him and said she'd been taking the same pills for 6 years, and the only new thing in her body that night was a chocolate her best friend's daughter had sent. The jury watched a frail woman in a wheelchair say that, and I watched their faces, and I knew. When it was my turn on the stand, the defense lawyer tried to make me the villain. He talked about how Whitney and I had been estranged, how I disapproved of her marriage, how a bitter old man might cook up a story to punish a daughter who'd cut him off. He asked me if I was angry at her. I was hurt, I said. There's a difference, and the hurt didn't make me do anything but tell the truth about what happened. I looked at the jury, not at him. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because a good woman almost died in my place, and somebody had to answer for it. The jury was out for 6 hours. When they came back, the foreman wouldn't look at Whitney. He looked at the judge and he said the word, guilty. Attempted murder in the first degree. Conspiracy. Conspiracy. The judge handed down 22 years. Whitney never once looked sorry. Through the whole trial, through the verdict, through the sentencing, her face stayed smooth and cold. And the only time her composure cracked was when they read out the part about the insurance money. And even then it wasn't grief that crossed her face. It was the look of someone who'd lost a bet. As they led her out, she turned and found me in the gallery, and I searched her eyes for one flicker of the little girl I taught to ride a bike on Linden Street. There was nothing there. A stranger looked back at me, and then she was gone. People keep telling me I got justice, that I should feel some kind of peace now. And I've thought about that a lot, sitting on Dorothy's porch with our lemonade, the two of us a little more broken than we used to be, but still here, still here. The truth is, justice and peace aren't the same thing. The court gave me a verdict. It couldn't give me back a daughter because the daughter I'm mourning stopped existing somewhere I never saw, in a quiet I never heard, long before that box ever landed on my porch. I won. I suppose I won, but what I won was the truth, and the truth weighed about 1,000 pounds, and I've been carrying it every day since. If there's anything I've learned at 68 years old, it's this. The people who can hurt you the worst are the ones you never raise a hand to defend yourself against, because you gave them the key a long time ago and never thought to ask for it back. Watch the quiet ones, watch the silences, and when somebody finally shows you who they are, believe them the first time, even when it breaks your heart. Especially when it's your own blood standing there in the doorway of the house you raised them in. Peace isn't a gift somebody hands you wrapped in gold foil. It's something you build with your own 2 hands, one quiet morning at a time, out of whatever's left standing after the storm. I've gone over it 1,000 times on Dorothy's porch, lemonade sweating in my hand, asking myself where the line was, where the little girl I taught to ride a bike on Linden Street became the woman who measured out a dose with my name beside it. And I keep landing on the same hard truth. Nothing in this life comes from nowhere. Every door that swung open in this nightmare I had a hand in. I gave Whitney a key after her mother's funeral and never asked for it back. I signed a power of attorney years ago without reading the fine print, back when trust felt like the safest thing I owned. small choices, made in love, that a desperate person turned into weapons. That's how cause and consequence work. The seeds you plant in good faith can still grow into something you never wanted, and the only defense you've got is to stay awake to what you're handing people. What saved me wasn't luck. When that vial showed up in my trash, I didn't touch it with my bare hands. When my heart was screaming to run to the hospital, I slowed down long enough to think, to bag the evidence, to call Roy instead of the whole world. When Whitney pushed me to eat a chocolate over the phone, something old and careful in me said, "Wait!" That kind of clear-headedness in the worst moment of your life isn't a gift you're born with. You build it, one hard decision at a time, by refusing to let panic do your thinking for you. If I could tell a younger man one thing, it's that the mind you sharpen in the calm years is the one that keeps you alive in the terrible ones. But knowing the truth and carrying it are two different weights. There were nights I wanted to burn that legal pad and pretend I'd never seen the handwriting. It would have been easier to call it a misunderstanding, to look away, to let my own blood get away with it, because facing her was the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't look away, not because I'm strong, but because Dorothy lay in a bed that was meant for me, and somebody had to be willing to stand in the cold light of a courtroom and say what happened out loud. And that's the part no one can do for you, the willingness to keep standing when every soft thing in you wants to sit down and quit. So if you take anything from an old man who lost a daughter and kept his life, let it be this. Be the kind of person whose word means something, because in the end, your integrity is the only testimony that holds. Keep your eyes open and your judgment sharp, especially toward the people you love most, because that's exactly where you'll never think to look. And when the storm finally comes for you, and it comes for everyone, find the backbone to do the right thing even when the right thing breaks your heart. Peace isn't handed to you wrapped in gold foil. You earn it. Quiet morning by quiet morning. Out of whatever's left standing.